Hello everyone, this is KansaiDorito, and this is the 9th episode of Girls Frontline 2 Explained, where we talk about girls, frontlines, and twos. Today we're going to talk about Lotta, aka M1 Super 90, aka, oh my god, wow, is that allowed? Lotta is a brand new shotgun unit, debuting in Girls Frontline 2, and personality-wise is shrewd and careful. She takes everything with the utmost caution and tries her absolute best to get her allies to see everything with the same amount of care she does, but never imposes because she's very shy. She's also a little young at heart, making bang-bang noises and pretending to shoot things with imaginary shotguns. Her real and imaginary weapon of choice is the Benelli M1 Super 90, made by Benelli, a gun manufacturer founded in 1967 as an offshoot of Benelli motorcycles, which honestly didn't really surprise me. Have you seen General Electric? Benelli's Super 90 line of shotguns were introduced in 1986, but their operation and their most defining feature, their inertia recoil system, wasn't invented by Benelli, despite what they'd like for you to believe. The inertia recoil system was created much earlier, in the 1900s by Swedish inventor Carl Sjögren, in his little-known ahead-of-its-time shotgun, the Sjögren inertia shotgun. It was a very unique system, well ahead of its time, using the recoil of the shotgun to compress a spring that would then uncompress and work the action. This has a few advantages over gas operation, but the main one is the fact that it doesn't use gas to operate, meaning there's no grime to clean and no soot to clog up the action, letting it tick shell after shell with basically no maintenance. While the Sjögren would fail commercially and very few would be made, Benelli would see the upsides of an inertia system and its advantages over gas operation, refine it, make it simple, reliable, light, and cheap, and make a semi-auto shotgun sensing that they would become more popular and make them for everyone: military, police, hunter, civilian. Their foresight would pay off, and semi-automatic shotguns will become extremely popular, and the Super 90's pump-action adjacent reliability would make it one of the most beloved shotguns for skeet shooters, duck hunters, and home defenders alike. But its a more simplistic design, lack of a rail system, and inability to mount attachments without actually physically changing the gun kept it out of the hands of military and police forces, who, even back then, needed a little more than just a cheap, reliable shotgun. The M2 Super 90 would release not long after, updating it and making it a bit more tactical and adding a proprietary new recoil dampening system. The M3 would come out just a bit after that, taking notes from the Spaz 12 and allowing cycling in semi-auto and pump action. The M4 Super 90 would go a separate direction entirely, but seeing as how M1014 is her own girl, we won't tread there. Yet. While the early Super 90s would never really see any kind of important conflict, they're damn good shotguns, and more than a good time. And while the M1 stopped production 2 decades ago, finding and obtaining them is still super easy. And you know who else is easy to obtain? Lotta, who you could see 6 for free not too long ago. So let's get to her, and her skills, cons, and upgrades. Her passive is Bonds of Friendship, and it's pretty interesting. Whenever an enemy in her range is hit with Cold Snap, a single target freeze DOT, and a debuff she can currently only apply herself, she does a weak-ass follow-up, dealing 50% of her attack and 1 point of stability. Now, I know, it sounds bad, but I promise she's cracked. Her passive just sucks, and her upgrades to it are kinda lacking too. Her C2 increases her mobility by 1, bringing her up to 6 tiles of movement, which puts her on par with Suomi. But without the easy movement up SMG units can apply to themselves, and with a pretty average range of 6, getting her where you need her might take a little bit. Her C4 doubles the stability of her support attack, bringing it up to a whopping 2. But again, this isn't why you use her, this is just supplemental. Her basic attack is lame too. 80% of her attack, an anemic 1 stability damage with her standard range 6. But it is her only single target attack, so using it is sometimes her only option. That being said, if you're using a Lotta, single target isn't what you're going for, so don't worry too much about this sucking. Her first skill is Cryo Rounds, a 3x5 AoE rectangle she can shoot off in the cardinal directions that destroys cover outside of the first row, applies Cold Snap for 1 turn, which activates her passive, and deals 60% of her attack. And at a base level, does no knockback, which seems like a weird thing to point out, but because she constantly gets compared to Vepli, it's worth mentioning. Her kit has been very underwhelming up to this point, but these next 2 skills are her bread and butter. Neural Adjustment gives her maxed Infectance and attack up 1 for 2 turns, which is absolutely as good as it sounds. And her C6 increases attack up 1 to attack up 2, taking the damage boost from 10% to 15%. Now her ult, which is honestly the main reason to use Lotta. Amplified Courage, a targeted 3-tile AoE that deals 100% of her attack as freeze damage, 2 stability damage, ignores cover damage reduction, and gives her extra command if she hits 2 or more enemies, letting her immediately use Neural Adjustment to use her ult again next turn. Like I said before, this combo is her bread and butter, and it's a hell of a lot of fun to pull off, and with the Suomi, it lets you apply freeze weakness to groups of enemies and then absolutely smoke them with Lotta's bombs. And with a minimum of 2 enemies hit to keep the combo going, Lotta can really lay it down hard. And her C1 helps her do it harder, applying Cold Snap to enemies she exploits, giving her up to 2 meaty follow-ups to really keep that damage coming, especially when paired with the Suomi, who gives out that freeze weakness like candy. Her C3 massively increases the flexibility of her bombs, letting her select a tile instead of an enemy, making it easier to hit those minimum 2 targets. Like I said before, Lotta's ult is Lotta, and when you need to absolutely decimate clumps of enemies, she's a damn fine choice. Now that we know what she does, let's talk about her nodes. Her first node, Silent Cheer, is exactly like every other skill that gives confectance at the start of battle. The main difference being Lotta's only way to gain confectance is her skill, and she doesn't have enough off the jump to get her ult off normally. So believe it or not, this skill is absolutely essential. Giving Lotta a full bar of confectance lets Lotta do literally whatever you need her to do immediately. Sure, you'll miss out on the attack buff on your first bomb, but having the option to do so and not being forced to skill turn 1 is really nice. Second node is, in my opinion, also essential. Confidence Booster increases the damage she deals to enemies with freeze debuffs by 10%, which is way more often than you think, especially with a Suomi on the team. And seeing as how this affects all damage dealt to freeze debuffed units, will also affect her follow-up support attacks, making them just that little bit more noticeable. Obviously, and almost all the time 10% damage boost is great, so you should totally run this. Trembling Aim is a nice side grade, especially against melee units, letting Lotta apply a stack of Frozen for 2 turns whenever she deals freeze damage. Combined with a Suomi, you can immediately put Frigid on an enemy, stopping them from moving at all, which is really funny. Or in tandem with a Wawa, spread Frozen like crazy and have Wawa pick them off with her now improved stability piercing. Careful Evasion is just bad, reducing AoE damage by 20% while above 50% of her HP. Lotta's movement is just good enough to get you out of almost every AoE you're going to be in, and because one of her best teammates is Suomi, any AoE damage will hardly be noticed. Bold Shout gives Cryo Rounds 3 tiles of knockback, letting her do the funny Vepli thing slightly worse since her movement isn't as good and the knockback isn't as good either. If you don't have Vepli, this is a decent enough substitute, but it doesn't really play to Lotta's strength, so personally, I'd pass. Soothing Touch is what Careful Evasion wishes it was, giving her Quick Barrier whenever she uses Neural Adjustment, which reduces the next instance of damage by 60%, giving her a nice boost to her survivability, especially if you run her without Suomi, on something like a Peritia Litara comp. Her Capstone is incredible. On Vepli, it increases damage dealt against enemies with movement debuffs by 7% and gives a 3% attack boost. While Lotta can definitely use this, Vepli applies movement debuffs literally every time and makes much better use of both the attack increase and damage increase. So it's definitely worth it if you're a Vepli fan like me. As you've hopefully figured out by this point, Lotta very much has her own niche, and her overlap with Vepli is minimal. Don't let the morons on Reddit or the dipshits in the official server tell you to build one or the other. Lotta has more consistent AoE, a bigger blast radius, and better synergy with freeze units in exchange for less AoE damage, less debuffs, less multipliers, less movement, non-existent single target damage, and less versatility when compared to Vepli. That being said, I'm not telling you Vepli is better. As with all units, their overall strength doesn't matter if the situation calls for one or the other, and Lotta is not only cute, but a hell of a lot of fun to play with. Now that we know what she does, let's look at her weapons and how they affect her. Firstly, all current shotguns in the game share a trait, giving quick barrier upon destroying cover, which by itself isn't good enough to justify using the SRs over the blue guns. That being said, none of the SR options are bad enough that you'd rather have a blue. Starting with the Spaz 12 or Sportivo Calibre 12, which shares the lowest damage among the unique shotguns with the Vepr 12. It has a more conditional effect, increasing the damage of her next skill by 10% if she gets healed, increasing by a differently scaled 5 to 10% if it brings her above 100 to 50% of her HP. Now, because you're probably running her with Suomi, this is only going to proc every 2 to 3 turns, which sucks. 30% uptime on a sometimes 20% damage boost isn't great, period. But is made even worse when you consider that Lotta is not a burst damage character, who cannot take adequate advantage of a predictable damage boost like, say, a Mosin can. Like I said before, if this really is your only option, you played the event wrong, you dingus! You missed out on the best SR shotgun in the game in 5 calibrations! Are you stupid? Or you're new to the game, in which case, welcome, and I hope you keep having fun. The Vepr 12 can be better. better being italicized and surrounded with asterisks. While it shares the honestly low base damage of the Spaz 12, it gives two 5 to 10% buffs at the start of each round, with two pairs of buffs it decides between, one being either AoE or targeted skills, and the other being confectant skills or basic attacks. Now, if Lady Luck smiles upon thee, you'll get your AoE and confectant skill buff on the same turn, totaling a 20% increase to her ult damage, which is good, but only happens a quarter of the time. Half the time, you'll only get one of the buffs you need, and will get a 10% increase, and sometimes you'll get both buffs that don't affect her ult at all, so you'll get none, meaning that on average you'll have a 10% damage buff, and doesn't require any input from one of your other units. But as someone who plays gacha games, you know when I say average, I'm sure as hell not talking about you, mister. Again though, even if you lose every single time and never get your ideal buffs, it's still a step up from the blues. The M1 Super 90 is the best SR shotgun in the game, and it's not even close. For starters, it has the highest base damage of the SRs, which is always nice. Its effect increases damage dealt by 2 to 10% for every 2 to 1 confectance point she uses, up to a max of 10 to 20%. Permanently. For Lotta specifically, this is incredibly easy to stack because she absolutely tears through confectants, letting you full stack a max calibration Super 90 in one fucking turn, giving her a now constantly active damage buff that affects everything. This shotgun is so good, and chances are you have more than one girl that wants this, but I can say with complete honesty, Lotta uses this thing just about as well as anyone else does, so don't feel bad letting her be greedy with this thing. She will not disappoint. For the SSRs, the Mezzaluna isn't the best, but its raw stats do give it an edge on the Super 90, even fully stacked. That being said, its effects don't do anything spectacular for Lotta, giving her a 20 to 40% damage increase if she maintains stability above 10 to 6, which considering she starts with 9 out of the box, she can't take advantage of this buff until you refine this thing to calibration 5. Now, the other two effects aren't terrible. The extra 2 stability healing if you're broken will get you out of a pinch if you're in too deep, but since she can't heal stability herself, she can't take advantage of this on her own. The last effect applies attack down 1 to 2 to the 1 to 2 closest enemies with the highest attack within 6 to 10 tiles for one turn, which isn't bad, seriously. Lotta's lower movement and lower range can leave her a little exposed if you need to secure those bombs, and having something to keep her in is nice, but seriously, just give it to Sabrina. The Heartseeker is nice, slightly lower attack, a 30% of confectance boost to give those bombs a nice damage increase, and an effect that deals fixed damage equal to 10 to 20% of her attack whenever she hits someone with an active skill. The extra 10 to 20% damage to enemies with movement debuffs is nice too, but you'll really only benefit from this if you have a Suomi freeze them first, manage to apply Cold Snap, or if you have the freeze node. But even if you do have the freed nose or apply Cold Snap, it only applies to damage dealt after they have a movement debuff on them, so even then you'll have to wait until next turn to do so. So while it is nice, it's not going to be up all the time under normal circumstances. The last effect gives her some more survivability, giving damage reduction 1 to 2 for 1 to 2 turns when an enemy with a movement debuff attacks her, but only once per turn unless it's max calibration. Like I mentioned with the Mezzaluna, this is nice, and because it happens on the enemy turn, it gives you a chance to have an ally apply movement down or apply it yourself with her node, letting you take advantage of it more often than not. The Heartseeker is honestly her best option in my opinion, and with a Suomi in tow, can be used very effectively by Lotta. The Expeditionary Pigeon is the Battle Pass option, with the lowest base attack of the SSRs. Its saving grace being the 15% attack buff, which gives a noticeable edge over the SR options, and its actual effects make up a lot for Lotta's weaknesses. Firstly, it increases damage dealt to enemies with either full or no stability by 15 to 30%, which is honestly better than it sounds because Suomi's ult doesn't steal stability damage. You can very safely apply that juicy ice weakness without fear of weakening your Lotta's damage. And the second effect applies stability imbalance 1 to 2 to her targets for 1 to 3 turns on a 3 to 2 turn cooldown, stability imbalance being a debuff that increases stability damage by a flat amount. Which is honestly great for Lotta. Because of how bad her stability damage is, letting her clear that stability to pierce the 60% damage reduction it gives will, believe it or not, massively increase her damage. That being said, there is no clear best option for Lotta, and a case could be easily made for the Heartseeker or even the Super 90 since the trash mobs you'll normally sick her on don't really call for that much damage. Despite everything I've said though, I must reiterate that Lotta is a fun unit, and while she definitely has her niche, she fills it extremely well, and pairs incredibly well with Suomi and Macchiato, two of the best units in the game. She absolutely deserves a spot amongst your other built units. Her attachments are exactly what you expect. Phase Strike or Cryo damage if you're feeling min-maxy, and attack crit rate crit damage. We good? Okay, cool. Now that you know all you need to know about Lotta, you've earned your diploma in dealing a lot of damage. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. If I missed anything, got something wrong, or you just want to talk about how much you love Vepli, please leave a comment. I earnestly read every single one. You guys are seriously the best. I know this guide took a bit longer, and if I'm being honest, I really have no excuse. I literally procrastinated because I was hanging out with you guys a bunch. Since launching my Discord, I've spent most of my day chatting with you guys, reading your posts and browsing your memes. And I want to honestly say from the bottom of my heart that you guys are the absolute greatest community I could have ever asked for. The launch of my server had me a bit anxious leading up to it, but you guys are hilarious and kind, and no one has posted anything illegal yet, so thanks for that. If you're not in there and you'd like to be, I have a link in the description. I spend 99% of my time on Discord in that server, so if you want to interact with me, ask some questions, interact with my incredible community, or just lurk, please join. I hope you enjoy your time in there as much as I do. I also wanted to thank my incredible returning viewers who have no doubt already liked and commented that the video was amazing before even finishing it. I love you guys, and I love reading your comments even more. As always, my Ko-fi is in the description if you'd like to directly support me in obtaining characters and weapons, or if you'd like to gift a skin for your favorite girl. The option is there as well. Barring that, super thanks and my channel membership are also available, and any donation made there or on Ko-fi will give you a special role in my Discord if you join. Just let me know. Just know it isn't necessary, and it never will be. All my content will be free and public forever. Now, for who's next. It's Lotta, who held onto her lead, leaving Ulrich and Groza in the dust, who are both about neck and neck for being after Lotta. And if it comes down to a tie, I'll hold a tiebreaker on my Discord. That being said, Wawa and Nemesis had both had large spikes in votes as well, so if you want to see either of them first, let me know in the comments. I want to say thank you again real quick for being the fucking best, and I hope I see you in the next video. Stay strapped.
What if we learn to communicate? What if we learn to communicate with each other using Morse code with a flashlight?
Beep 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 beep.
Propane and gas leak.
Beep beep beep.
Welcome back.
Safe house.
Hi.
Safe house is here.
That was fucking fast. What? I don't
Oh,
remember
that
being
was so
that
easy.
Yeah, I think that Blood Harvest is like canonically their first one of the survivors. No.
Benelli's system is reliable because it is based